TrevBeats Show, TrevBeats Show. Yeah. TrevBeats Show, TrevBeats Show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the TrevBeats Show. And my guest today, not only is it a dear friend of mine, he may be one of the people that I've known the longest out of everyone I've ever known. Like, we met probably, I want to say, 1986, around then. It's just unbelievable. And, you know, we're still great friends. He's become one of the greatest mix engineers of modern history, and I'm so honored to have him on the show today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Manny Marroquin. Manny! What's up, bro?
Buddy. Time flies when you're having fun. I'll never forget the day. I remember like it was yesterday, the day I met you, and it's been what a ride. What a ride. I mean, we met in middle school. Yeah, John Burroughs school, man. And it's funny because I had a chance to see you, as you know, tell your viewers, I got a chance to see you play at the Baked Potato last weekend with John DeVersa, another Hammy alumni. Yep. And he said the best when he introduced you. He's like, man, the way Trevor's playing now is exactly how he sounded when he was 16. I'm like, you genuinely helped me quit drums because and thank you Nate Laborio for doing that, because that was, you know, I went and went straight to the studio because of drummers like yourself, you know.
Some people don't know, Manny, and you know, it's crazy because a lot of people don't know about your history as a drummer. And when we were in high school, I mean, in the drum line, bro, ladies and gentlemen, don't get it twisted. Manny got hands. Like, don't get it twisted. On that snare drum, Manny had hands for sure. So it's like, we know him as another way, but don't let that fool you. I'm sure it wouldn't take too much to get right back to where you were. But yo, bro, it's amazing. I mean, you know, it's just amazing. You know, when you know somebody in the beginning and then they get to be as accomplished as you are, and, you know, and we have some mutual friends that we've kind of known the same kind of way. But when you get to see that, it's just an amazing thing because it's such a small percentage of everyone that's trying to do this, you know, that gets to this level. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I've been able to witness that with you. And it's like, bro, I mean, you've always been the same guy. You've never changed. You know what I'm saying? Whenever we could work together, we worked together over the years in all these different capacities. And it's just a beautiful thing, bro. So I'm just so happy that we're still friends, man, and we were able to carry this on. It's like going to be 40 years next year.
Oh, my gosh. Well, you know, the only good thing with getting older is that wisdom, right? And the appreciation for friends. I mean, listen, we've been friends for a long time, and the same goes out to you, man. You've stayed the same, and and you keep, you know, you're a master at what you do as well. And I feel like, you know, you got to really love what you do, right? You really got to love it, because there's so many ups and downs. There's so many disappointments along the way. There's highs and lows with anything. And I feel like the only thing that can keep you going is that the true love for the art form. And I think that's what keeps us going. I think that's what separates a lot. You know, listen, it can get very difficult, and I always say, if you don't keep going, just don't quit. And I feel like we just, you know, we just keep going and going and going and still loving it. I was like a little kid watching you guys play at the Baked Potato. Listen, it was one of the best nights I've had in a long, long time. And it was like, it just brought me I had a smile on my face the whole time, you know, just watching you play.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And John, shout out to John, too.
Yeah. Hell yeah. John was killing it. Oh, my gosh. It was so tasteful, too. Like, he only did a couple solos, but they were so tasteful. I mean, he almost like let the band do their thing. And every once in a while, he'll get up and you're like, oh, snap. What the hell? I haven't heard him play in such a long time. Maybe even high school. And for those of you that don't know, we went to Hamilton High School, and that was one of the environments there, and in John Burroughs, yeah, the middle school. But I feel like, watching you play the other night, I don't know if you remember this, but one of those middle school years, we went to NAMM together, and we were there at the same time. And I always tell this story where you started playing, and you had, like, within 5-10 minutes, you had about 60 people around you just watching this kid just rip. Like, I was like, yeah, man, that's my homie. That's right. That's right.
The old NAMM days, bro.
Proud. I was like, hell yeah, my friend can kick your ass too.
I mean, you know what? It's so funny because even that experience, I mean, bro, it used to be so fun, and now they're walking around with a freaking meter, and if you're a decibel meter, and they're trying to fine you, it's a different vibe now, man. I mean, yeah, bro, that used to be, that was such a aspirational thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, before we had gear, before we had endorsements, before we had partnerships, and it was like a real life magazine, bro. You know what I mean?
That's when there was the good old days of NAMM.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. It was such a creative juices and creative people. And I feel like, we grew up in an era that was, this is like pre tools, pre drum good drum machines, but it wasn't like as replacing drummers, but it was just enhancing, and we all had to work for that that art form, right? You had to, like, put in the work. It wasn't like, and some people were obviously more natural than others.
No, exactly. But it's amazing that you're saying that, because that's what happens. Like, some people think that it's just one big break and it just is here because they see the success, and they're like, oh, somebody put him on or whatever, and they don't know this crazy amount of work that's been put in. You know what I mean? And it's like, looking back, I mean, now that you're looking back, not that anything's over, but just at this point in your life and your career, do you think your career was more about a series of small doors opening and you were always ready, or was there one big thing that stands out where you're like, okay, that's what made me who I am?
It's funny because I feel like that continues. I feel like that cycle continues. I always say the bus always comes around, right? And you get on it, and sometimes the preparation is not there. So I feel like, for me personally, man, I just had the blinders on, and I didn't look around. I didn't see my competition or who was doing better than me or anything. I just worried about what I was doing, and I just worried about hopefully delivering something that's in my control, right? Because there's so many things, as you know, that are just not in your control, and I feel like too many people waste time on the things that we have no control over, right? And I learned that early in my career, where, like, I used to be really hard on myself, and then I realized that there's certain things you just have no control. And I think that to have a longer career, because listen, you don't have the 10,000 hours, we have 30,000 hours.
Right.
Way past that point. So I feel like we're sort of experts in what we do. And even as a quote expert, we're still fighting the same things that we did when we were younger, right? And there's an excitement about that because it's a level playing field now. As a mixer, I'm competing with kids in mom's basement, really, if you think about it, because we all have the same tools now. So people ask me about what's the difference of a mixer today than there was maybe 20 plus years ago. And some people, even last night, I had a conversation with someone that said, oh, mixing must be easier today. And I'm like, you know what? In a way, it could be harder today because we are all on the same playing field. So we have the same tools, the same everything. So now I'm not only competing with other studio cats, but I'm competing with the world. And if you think about it that way. So for me, worrying about myself and how I can hopefully create something that we're proud of and satisfying the client, right? Because the client is ultimately is your client.
Right.
You're here to serve them, and that sometimes could be the artist, sometimes it could be a producer, a songwriter, a manager, a label, whoever that client is. Hopefully, you're emotionally can portray that song that's been given to you, right? I feel like the biggest misconception of a mixer is that we make things sound better, which is sounding better. That's I don't know if that even exists. It's so subjective, right? So
Mm.
I remember doing mixes back in the day that sounded good, that I try to make sound good, right? And then 2 years later, even today, I mean, it sounds like it doesn't sound good because it's constantly changing, right? But I remember the records that make me feel a certain way, and not technically sounding the best, but it felt good. And to me, those are the records that I play today and still get the same emotion, right? So I learned that early in my career as well, that chasing a sound, I feel like as a young engineer, we make that mistake so many times to chase a sound. But I always say chase an emotion, because that's really what we're about. I mean, we're about to hopefully portray that emotion so that when you hear, you don't have to think about it, but hopefully you can either dance, cry, or punch a wall, whatever that true emotion of what's been given to us. And I'm sure it's like that playing drums too. When you're in the studio, even the other night at Baked Potato, how you guys almost mixed each other, like it's a constant conversation that you had on stage. And I feel like that is kind of almost not the same, but in a different way. We're chasing the same thing, right? We're kind of chasing that hopefully emotion that will, whoever the 30, 50, 150 people there, or the thousands or millions that hear this song, right? I mean, how does it affect them emotionally, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that's something that we can't lose, perspective on. We still got to remind ourselves that that's why we were hired.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's very important, because sometimes people think that it is the mixer is just a magician. You know what I'm saying? And it's like you guys just take something that's horribly recorded and horribly tracked, and you just make it incredible. And of course, you do the best you can, but obviously, like anything else, the better that you get it, you know what I'm saying, the better you can do your job. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting though, because despite all that, I mean, you've been doing this so long and have stayed relevant around so many sounds and formats and generations of artists and all that kind of stuff. Adaptability, it has to be something that you have at least thought of a little bit. I mean, it can't, to me, none of that's an accident. So how intentional was it to be able to adapt? You know what I'm saying? And what are the habits that helped you just not be like, oh man, he's just a rock guy, or he's just a rap mixer? Like, because just the whole spectrum with you, bro, it's unbelievable. How does that work, man?
It's funny you say that, because it is. I remember one story. One story that comes to mind. There's a guy, one of my favorite artists, Citizen Cove, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in New York at the A&R's office, and he plays me some records, and I absolutely loved it. And if you remember back in the day, the good old days, right? We as mixers, we were all kind of pigeonholed, right? You had the rock mixers, you had the hip hop mixers, you had the country, right? None of them kind of did this. It was just, you were just pigeonholed, and to me that was like, you're right, it was by design. I did not want to be, and I was doing a lot of R&B and West Coast hip hop at the time, and I was like, you know what, I need to just diversify, because you're only as good as your client, and when that client goes and comes and goes, and your chances are you're going to be forgotten quickly, right? So I thought I need to diversify. So they played me Citizen Code, and I called my manager and I said, hey man, I got to work on this album. It's nothing like anything like I've mixed so far, but I really think that this is going to be good for my career, because it's good for my soul, right? So I get a call back, and he's like, man, the budget is super low, but once you pay the studio and this and that, you're going to be left with like almost nothing, right? And I remember telling him, I'm like, you know what, this is a good investment though. I'm not doing this, look, we obviously want to make money and all, but I don't think anybody gets in the music industry thinking about money.
Right.
Uh, so, and if you do, you'll have a very short lasting career.
Right.
So then I said, no, we got to do it. And it was one of those moments where I'll never forget somebody, it wasn't a John Mayer, but somebody brought that album up, and I remember them being inspired by it. And all of a sudden, now I'm this alternative-ish live music guy. And that's like you said, not a lot of people know that that's my background, right?
Right.
I spent hours on, even as a drummer, when you hit the snare, like the other night, you were hitting the snare in different places for different songs. You were tapping your fingers. I mean, it's like that's the background. I mean, how the beater hits the bass drum. And so for me, live drums, that was my thing, and people had no idea that I could do that, which was so shocking. So then when you do it and you visualize a drum kit in front of you and you start EQing and placing all that stuff, people are like, oh damn, I didn't know you knew how to do that, right? So it definitely was by design, because I never wanted, I'm a fan of music, all kinds of music, and I felt like it would be a shame to be pigeonholed, right?
Yeah.
And I still take those chances. I still, like, whether it's from whatever genre, I'm like, and I think that today, now you fast forward to today, I feel like more now mixers are more genreless mixers, but when you study like music history in the last X amount of years, that wasn't the case then, man. That was like almost like, I don't want to say forward thinking, because I'm not saying that by any means, but it was definitely a different type of thinking. So I was always aware of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now it's like the other thing that really has crept into, all of our spaces, but definitely in your space in certain areas, is AI. And as the through line of my first season is AI. So I really bring this up because I'm interested and curious on how it is affecting all these different, various facets of the music experience. So in the engineering world, is moving so fast, and now, I remember a couple years ago, we were all geeked because of stem separation. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, wow, I mean, how can, because we're taught once it's down to 2 tracks, that's it. You know what I'm saying? So to receive that reverse engineer in our lifetime, it was like what's going on? And so, now you got, the mix assistants, and you upload to like apps for mastering, you know what I'm saying? Like the landers and all that kind of stuff. So when that first came out, I wasn't even aware it was AI. I thought it was a service. I thought there was somebody mastering when you uploaded it. You know what I mean? So where do you see, where do you see AI? Is it, you think it's going to add value to the workflow, or has it added value to your workflow? Or do you think it's, going to make stuff less human, like flatten the human feel?
Okay, so the dirty word of the industry, right? AI. I feel like there's a lot of fear, right? Right now, everyone's fearful of this word. Any entertainment, whether it's our music or film or TV, right? So one thing, I can only look at the past, at the history, right? I remember when Pro Tools first came out, right? And we were doing tape, and a lot of our peers did not embrace that, and they're nowhere to, I mean, who knows what they're doing today, but unfortunately, and but I was always aware of, like, look, it's evolution. We're gonna keep adapting. You said that word earlier. I feel like we should all have tattoos, adapt or die on our necks or something. You have to adapt. You got to keep adapting. The moment you stop growing, that's the moment you might as well hang them up, right? So I think it's really important to look at history. In this case, like from tape to Pro Tools, that was a big jump, if you remember that.
Sure.
To me, in today's world, AI is just a word, but I think of it as an umbrella, and there's a lot of different subfolders from that umbrella, right? From that main folder, I guess. So one of them we'll start with technology in the studio, right? We're both drummers, or you're a drummer. I was a wannabe drummer. And if you remember when the drum machine came out, right? I remember my bus driver at Hamilton, right, said, "Hey man, we're screwed. These drum machines are sounding so real, and you can do this, like you can do the attack and this, and you can basically replace drummers." And listen, as a 15-year-old, I'm like, "Oh damn, that's
Right.
that's the end of us, right?" But it just cut the fat, and that was part of the fat, right? It cut drummers that didn't need to be drummers, and I feel like right now there's a lot of producers that should not be producers. There's a lot of beat
Mm.
makers. Unfortunately, some of those are going to lose their job,
Yeah.
to something like tools. So I think it's just a tool. So in the studio, it's really important for us to embrace how we're going to use that tool and not say that it's going to replace us, but it's going to enhance whatever we do. Any technological advancement, I feel that the main purpose is to get from A to B quicker, right? And so we can have more time to do the things that you want to do, whatever that
Right.
is. So
Right.
from A to B, if you think of technology from cars, planes, whatever it is, the purpose is to make our life simpler, to
Right.
find more time, right? So I feel like AI is going to be that tool that is not going to replace us, but it is going to hopefully embrace what we do. Now, I feel like in the future, there's going to be uh, like when digital cameras first came out, it was film, and some of these competitions, you got, okay, this is the best photograph with film, and then
Right.
this is the best photograph with filters, right? I say that the next billion-dollar company is going to be how we police that ethical,
Mm.
ethical or unethical machine learning and AI. So in the future, there's going to be artists that are going to be totally freaking AI 100%, but we're going to know about them, So maybe the kids are going to listen to them, and it's just Pepsi and Coke,
Right.
Uh,
Right.
now, there's going to be an art form to creating those artists in the future. There is going to be an art form, just like there's an art form with some of these drummers that do beats and on drum machines, and all of a sudden you think it's real. It's
Right.
no different than picking up a sample. It's no different than sampling James Brown, the funky drummer or whatever. I
Right.
mean, it's just an evolution of now you lifted that from the record. It took years no, you got to pay for that and this, and that. Same thing is going to happen with AI. I feel like there's going to be policing involved, and I think that's going to really dictate on how and where we go with it. Right now is the Wild West, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't fear it, but I would embrace it
Right.
to see how it will make your workflow better and quicker.
Right.
Isn't
Yeah.
going to replace? I mean, look, I don't want to say never, but it's not in our lifetimes will you replace? I can't replace you. I mean,
I mean, what
but
we saw the other day, that's not gonna happen. You
there's
know what I'm saying?
that's never going to happen. You can have holograms and like you could be there and everything could be, but it's not going to happen. I
Yeah.
think in the history of technology and music, there's always a rough time, of
Exactly.
I mean, there's some 80s music with when the synths came out. Remember that?
Exactly.
There
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of crappy music for a year, but now we don't even think about it. Another example is like Beatles, man. They were panning bass to the left and drums to the right. Look, I love Beatles records, but that was probably a bad idea, right? But they went from mono to stereo, and then all of a sudden we have two speakers, and no one's doing that anymore. So they were experimenting. So during that experimentation, you're going to learn a lot. And I think that like Beatles learned that, oh, you know what? We tried it, but it doesn't really work. Let's put it back in the middle and then put other things on the sides, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what's going to happen with AI, where we're going to go through this revolution. And whoever comes out on top on the other side is going to be people that embrace it and know how to deal with it. But if you have that fear of being replaced, then man, you got to change that mentality because you're probably going to be replaced.
Yeah.
So it's just about thinking of. You said it earlier. You got how do you evolve, right? And I think that's to all our peers in the industry. We just got to think of how we can evolve with it because it's not going anywhere. So
No,
you
it's
might
not
as
going anywhere. It's not. It's never going back in the hat. The cat is out.
well. Yeah,
and
yeah.
it is
There's
just
gonna be a lot
there.
of casualties. There's gonna be a lot of casualties, and we hope it's not us. We're gonna adapt. It's like I think I told you the other night. We're like it's like the postman, right? If you still want to be a postman, you're gonna have to adapt and you're gonna have to evolve and become that Amazon driver.
Right, right, exactly, because that's
So,
something that's changing every day. I mean, and we're here. I mean, it's happening like weekly. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the
yeah,
laws are changing. You can register AI songs now. You can copyright AI songs now, as long as they're not 100% and you have something to do with it. And there, it's still a gray area. I mean, I did a whole AI album last year to mark the time we were in. Full AI. And
yeah,
because
yeah.
I knew it was going to go crazy, and that was the early side. You know what I mean? But it's like now that I'm seeing you can register it, and when I'm also doing a lot of research on all these different platforms and what
Mhm.
have you, and I notice with Suno, which is obviously right now probably one of the biggest ones, when you make a piece of music, if you are putting something in it, they give you that evidence, right? So if you're uploading something in it or beatboxing in it or playing keys or beating on the table, whatever, and then you prompt on top, they actually give you the original source material. And
Wow.
and by studying some legal things I've been studying lately, that actually puts you in the game to copyright it, because
Mhm.
now it's
Wow.
aided. Fully prompt, no. If you
Yeah.
just prompt and like whatever it spits out, that's not it. But when you have that, interaction, it does allow you to copyright it. So the other question I have for you regarding AI, and then we'll get off of it, is does the fact that people use AI, I mean, are you still finding out, like, are you getting songs and people aren't saying it, and then you're like, oh, this must be AI? Like, is that happening, or are people trying to just mix it
No,
themselves now?
it's been happening. It's been
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
happening for a while. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think again, it's a dirty word, so they don't disclose it, but you
Mm-hmm.
can almost tell. You can
Mm-hmm.
kind of tell you know, what's been manipulated by something other than the human, right?
Right.
Uh, but again, going back to if you're a songwriter and back in the day, you would walk in with a thesaurus, right? And if you get stuck on a word, you just look it up, and there's five other words, right? They're the same meaning, just different words. If
Right.
you on steroids and you fast forward, right? I think AI can help a lot of creatives too. I think if
Yeah.
you think about it, like being having writer's block could be a thing of the past. It
True.
could be a thing of the past,
Yeah, I
and
believe it's a tool. Yeah.
it's
Yep.
a tool. Yeah, I mean, listen, you get stuck in the second verse. ChatGPT is not going to write it for you, but it may give you the same thesaurus feeling. Where okay, I got a little inspiration because I wanted to write a verse about blah 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 and blah blah blah, and then you go deep, 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 and then now all of a sudden you're in that mode, and you may come up with a great verse that you were stuck with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so for those reasons, we have to stay positive and focus on what the good things that it can do. Can it replace artists? I don't think that's ever going to happen. Can it? It's almost like, remember the 3D films when they were
Sure.
out not long ago. Actually, you would wear the glasses even like 10, 12 years ago. They were like only 3D, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the same thing. It came and went. I mean, everybody, yeah, there's certain films that are better in 3D. And I remember other films, I'm like, man, I hate this movie because of the 3D glasses and feel and all that. I feel like in the future, music is going to be very similar, where people are going to go, they're going to realize that this sort of machine or something that you prompt and all that it doesn't have enough soulfulness to it, and it's fabricated. It's just like that 3D film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want to take those glasses off. And then
Right.
some projects that your kids are listening to, like the teenage girl or whatever, they don't care what it is. Maybe music people or not music people, they'll listen to something and they may not care that it's AI. And I feel like that's going to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
you know what? When we go, and it's almost like listening to having certain tastes in music. Some people like bubblegum pop, spit it out 30 seconds later. I think that genre is probably going to be, it's already
Yeah.
maybe I would say suffering, but you can probably do bubblegum stuff really easily, right?
Yeah.
So it probably will get rid of some of those producers, and
Yeah.
writers and mixers.
Yeah.
I do believe that, like you said the other night, there's certain things that you just can't replicate. One last thing with AI and machine learning is it it only learns from the past. It doesn't look into
Ah.
the future. So we got to always remember that. So can it mimic something? Absolutely. Can it do it well? It's getting there, but it does not look into the future. So
Ah.
that is
Yeah.
that's the one thing where we got to remind ourselves that it's not looking into the future. So, as you know, creatives, when you go into the studio, we're always trying to be forward thinkers, right?
Yep.
Uh, yeah, with inspiration from the past in the new way for the future. AI is not going to be able to do that. Who knows? Maybe someday it will, but the learning happens from the past, not the future. So for
True.
that reason, if you're creative, you can still be creative. And now you have this other tool, that going back to the drums, right? Like if you wanted back in the day, if you wanted to write a song to a simple beat, right? Boom, stat, boom, boom, stat, right? You would have to hire a drummer, go to the studio, mic up the drums, get an engineer. That could be either 2 hours or 2 days, right? And it
Yeah.
would be expensive. And then the drum machine comes out, and you're like, doom, ba, doom, and then that was 10 minutes later. You can write to that.
Yep.
Think about that, right? Like at that moment, you would be scared that, oh my gosh, we're gonna be replaced.
Right.
But again, it hasn't replaced anyone.
Right.
The good drummers, and I feel that that's what it's gonna be. You're gonna be able to, like, you know what? Let me pick that. Let me prompt it this because I want this type of guitar, and what I'm doing, I'm not getting it. But everything else is done, quote, the good old way.
Yeah.
But there's gonna be, it's just like sampling. It's just like, lifting something off a record. It's just gonna be that. It's like splice too. You'll have access to different things quicker, and hopefully
Yeah.
that will inspire you to do things differently as well.
Yeah. The inspiration part of it, I agree, and I feel like there is a way to utilize it in a way that's just very helpful. And when the drum machine came out, I mean, there was no outrage for us. It was just us. And something you said earlier too, that a lot of times we don't think about because it's so hard for us to fathom. Well, because we've never been like this. People that aren't musicians don't have our ears. They have a different, sometimes. So they just sometimes genuinely, not only do they not know, but they just wouldn't even care. It's just purely based on the emotion at the moment. They can't hear that it's not a great mix and that it sounds mechanical. They just don't. It's just not even there. We obsess over it because it's like immediate for us. But I think it's going to find its place. I do think what you said earlier. I think we're going to start seeing collaborative Grammys. You know what I'm saying? I think we're going to see a lot of things. I've heard Harvey talk about it in other interviews that he's. It's not going anywhere. So I think that's going to be amazing. So now I know that we're going to talk. We've talked about a lot of the stuff that you've done and what's happening and where things are now. I personally want my viewers to just hear the moment from, say, Hamilton High School to Enterprise, like that moment, Manny, because we know you as the guy and the mixer, but I want, just so everybody understands, this was something that was a lot of hard work, including that famous story with taking the manual home and all that kind of stuff, right? So, please give us some of that earlier journey to where you are today, and then we're going to skip to, where you really are with like Larrabee and verse and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, it's if you remember back in the day, the David Sears was the one that first talked about mixing in high school. I didn't even know that existed.
Mm.
The stereotype back then was the guy with the long hair and the ponytail, Caucasian with a cigarette just hanging and then doing this with the knobs, right? That was like what we looked. That's what an engineer back then. Nobody looked like me. No, there was no minorities doing this, right?
Right.
So listen, I think naively enough, thank goodness, I was like, oh, I want to do that, right? And that was my whole focus on how to get to be the guy in that room, right? So when we graduated from high school, the best, I don't know, I don't want to put David, I don't. But he basically gave me advice on like the best way to do it is you just go get a job at a studio, right? And which was very very ballsy for him to say that, but it's the best advice that I've ever received from anyone. So I went and I started applying, before the internet. So I remember going to this library, the LA Public Library in downtown LA, and I started looking at all the studios in town because I had to send my resume, right? And recording school at the time helped me just write a resume. It didn't teach me a lot, but it just showed me how to write a resume. And I hit up all the studios. Nobody wanted to hire me. And then all of a sudden, Enterprise ended up returning my call, and they needed a runner. I went there, and I always say it's the best and the worst day of my life to that point, because the best, I'm working one of the best studios, right? But the worst is because I'm like, they hand me a bucket and say, go clean that bathroom, I'm like, fuck, I thought I was going to be in the studio, man. I didn't know I was going to be freaking wiping counters and like, taking the trash out and making coffee. I knew some of that, of course, but I feel like that transition from, okay, how do you get started? Today, of course, is a different world, but at that point for me was getting in a big studio, right? Today's engineer has an option of going to the there's only a few left, big studios, right, or going the DIY or partnering up with a producer that's doing a lot of stuff, and you learn as you go along. I just took the old traditional route of going to a big studio and learning from it, and the one thing that I got to say is I remember being very persistent. Tom Brown, he was a studio manager, and I would go to him every day after a few months. Like I would ask him if I could shadow, right? And it's like, back then, these are sonic temples. You can't just walk in, you got to earn it, right? And I understood that. So, but it became a joke. I would go, hey, can I shadow? Can I shadow? Can I shadow? And one day, sure thing, man, I was making a cappuccino for him, comes in the kitchen, and he goes, how well do you know the board? I'm like, oh, I know it really well. What are you talking about? Of course. I didn't even know where the volume was. I was totally lying, right? And he goes, I have a session and I can't find an assistant. I just need a body in there. Can you do it? I was like, this is my moment. This is the moment I've been waiting for. But okay, so I believe there were 3 of us, 3 or 4 runners. One had been there almost 2 years, Tommy. And then, I forget the other guy. He was there about 12 months, maybe a year and a couple months. And I had only been there for 3 months. So this guy comes up to the new guy, instead of the guys that had a little more seniority. So I always think about, why is it that he picked me, right? And there's that saying, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, right? Not because I didn't even know anything about the room, but I showed the desire to be in the room more than the other guys. And I think that's a great lesson for anyone that's beginning their career, that talent is amazing. It's great, right? But sometimes you don't know talent when you walk in the room. You don't know the knowledge or talent, even for anybody, right? But you will notice the desire, right? You will notice the desire right away. You can tell when someone wants to be in the room, and you can tell when someone just feels the need to be in the room. And recognizing that to me is very important for anyone. So he recognized that I was just the squeakiest wheel, that I wanted to be in the room and let the chips fall where they fall. So that, to me, as I always tell younger engineers, up and coming producers as well, like, hey man, just show that you really want to be in the room, and then everything will just happen, and of course you got to keep that attitude. I always say, I don't want to be stuck with an asshole for 12 hours a day in the studio, right? But just don't be an asshole, just be a good person, be a fun person, and just show that you want to be there. It's a lot simpler than what we make it out to be. You know what I'm saying? We overthink it, and it's. I always say common sense. If you say please and thank you, gosh, that will take you and be on time, right? Those three things, you're in the room. You'd be surprised how most people don't have that, and it's forget generational because I'm gonna sound like the old guy. Oh, back I walked 15 miles and under the heat on my knees and blah blah blah. So I feel like whether it's generational or not, I feel that some things don't change. The desire to be in the room,
That's crazy. I mean, I think it's funny because, as you get older, you realize that persistence and consistency are like brothers. You know what I mean? It's like it's the same thing. So we keep hearing this consistency when you're trying to post something, consistency when you're releasing music, consistency with that. The persistence is the same way when you're trying to learn something. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're just staying on it. And those of us that are creatives, we've just dedicated whole parts of our life to just staying on this mission. And, sometimes it pays off. In your case, it's paid off. A lot of our cases, a lot of people don't get that same opportunity. But thankfully, we're around a lot of people. We went to high school with a lot of people in an environment where we ended up pursuing music professionally. So, that's the early days of Manny that led up to where things are now. And the question I have now, right before we get out of here, just one more other question after this, but the question I have now is you're working, you've amassed a whole career, you've been killing it. I know personally that you had a room there at Larrabee for a long time. You were mixing out of there for probably years. At what point did you say, you know what? I think it's time for me to get in the studio business.
I don't recommend it. So the studio business, I picked probably two of the worst businesses, studios and restaurants, right? I feel like, so when '08 happened, the bubble, right? I mean, the music industry, real estate, and the crash it just crashed, right? So at that point, the owner comes up to me and said, "Hey, man, I see it sinking. I'm getting out of this." Because before it was a business, right? People that weren't creative owned studios. If you think about it, right? It was a legit business, and now I feel like most creatives own their own studios, right?
Right.
So at that point, I remember him telling me that he's thinking of selling the studio, and man, to me, it's like that never crossed my mind. And he goes, "Look, I'm in Studio 2 at Larrabee. Well, this is Studio 3, but in Studio 2 is Giorgio Moroder's original room from 1984. So it's kind of legendary, if you know type of room, right?" So he goes, "This is Moroder's room. So whoever buys it is probably going to want this room, and they're going to probably kick you out, right?" And that was so naive. I was like, what do you mean they can kick me out? What are you talking about, right? So I call my business manager. I'm like, "Hey, man, I think I got to buy a studio." It's like, "Are you out of your freaking mind?" It's like, well, I mean, this could be a good time because that was it, man. Fear of losing my room. It forced me to think different. And I thank him for that because it forced me to think. My first entrepreneurship mentality started from that, because now one of the best pieces of advice, he goes, "Look, man, I decided to buy it." And he goes, "Your biggest challenge is going to be when your mixer hat is on and when your business studio owner hat is on." And I always remember those words because it's, I could, what he was saying is that you have to be a good business person to run a studio, business 101. And us creatives, because we are in the creative field, we don't really think like that. And he was just trying to make me aware that I had to have a different type of thinking. And that was the first step, looking back, like, oh, you know what? There's a different mentality that we're not taught. We're not taught that when we're young. And I feel like you just got to kind of learn it as you go along. and hopefully you don't make as many mistakes, make them, and they're not detrimental to the business. Look, it's the best thing I've done because I feel like I have my creative hub here, and I'm able to be creative and have a home as opposed to moving around. It's not for everyone, some people like moving around studios and all that, but to me it's like consistency. I
Yeah.
wanted that consistency to be the quality, and I'm like a dinosaur because I'm still using this board behind me where I think 90% of my peers are probably like, what is that thing in the back? Like, you use one of those, you dummy.
Well, the
But it's
physics is still there, bro. The physics of
yeah,
sound are still there, and
yeah.
I think from the career you can tell that it matters. You know what I mean?
It does, man. It really does. Rupert Neve said it best when he's like, they're comparing analog. Remember that battle back in the day? Oh, analog versus digital. And to me, it's just two different colors. It's not one better or it's not better. It's just different. So he said it, look, you just can't compare it because it's different. One is ones and zeros. The other one is there's a current that goes through the desk, right? So, and the way he explained it, and it goes through this section, and at the end there's a VCA, a voltage controlled amplifier, and there's current going through that fader. It
Right,
doesn't shock you, it's not big enough to shock you, but there's actually current going through those faders, right?
right.
And he goes, how can you grab a trackball or a mouse if you can actually have some current? Now, whether that current is doing anything or not through your body, that's, whatever that is. I believe that something goes through your body, right?
Mm,
That may be my own way of psyching myself and prepping, stretching and all that, but before the race, but it is something that you got to think about. There's a current going through your body, and the way he said it, it was so beautiful,
wow.
and it's the best way to explain the difference just between mixing in the box and mixing with an analog console, right? There's still some current, and I'd love to be that dreamer and that I'm making that it's kind of mixing itself based on different currents.
Well, I mean, remember, you just said it yourself. I mean, listen, so many studios have gone, and you're still here now with one of the most prominent destination studios in Los Angeles. So it's like, that's already huge. You've sustained, you've expanded. We're going to talk about that now. I remember one time I get a call, and it was like, yo, Trev, you got to come over to Larrabee. I'm working on something, bro, and I got to show you. Okay, cool. I'm going to pull up. And here we go to the early stages of probably not even fully framed out Verse at the time, right? Which is now Verse LA. And to see it from that moment to what it is now, I mean, some of the best cuisine in Los Angeles, sonically just a whole nother level inside the establishment with, I'm always bragging about, man, you can't even hear the silverware, because it's been EQ'd out. You can't hear the silver, and it's linked to the studio next door, and now you have the other residences. Is there a specific name for that? I don't remember the name for your. Is it a?
It's funny. We call it the Harmony House, which we have
Ah,
suites, lofts, and a PDR.
yeah. And I just worked there, and it's incredible. The vibe is incredible. Even those rooms sound incredible. So you've basically future-proofed something that is almost in a lot of places going obsolete. But not only do you have one of the great studios, you've actually equipped it for the future. And to me, that forward thinking is something that is just as creative as what you do when you're mixing. That's another form of creativity because you saw something and we're like, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to serve this need. And now you're not relegated to the box stuff that's happening everywhere. Listen, you got your console, your stuff sounds amazing, and the proof is in the pudding. You know what I mean? So for the next generation of engineer, like for the next generation of mixers, right? What do I think a lot of people are just aiming for placements, right? But I'm to assist them in aiming for longevity. What strategic moves do you think they should be making now, in terms of their brand and the relationships and, ownership over what they do so they can one day try to be in a position that you are?
I'll start with like verse, right? Verse is a very, very ambitious project. That just imagine this: the studio rat goes and tries to give you the elevator pitch, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna build a big studio and put a restaurant in it, and we're gonna have an SSL in the kitchen where we're gonna record everything, but the sound is gonna be controlled by blah blah blah, and we're gonna have 52 speakers. And like, I feel like people, they did, some of them was like, man, you better just stick to mixing, like so it's a very ambitious project. And look, knock on wood, man, it's been doing fairly well. And you know, one thing that I gotta say is like, it's authentic. It is what it is. It's us. It's me. Hopefully leading the way and trying to create something that's special to bring community. Right. We both grew up in LA, and LA, if you think about it, hasn't really had a community, a music community. If you think about it, I mean, the closest I can think of is the Sunset Strip, right? Where you had 5 clubs and bands playing all over them. You could literally hop between all the clubs and see different bands on any given night. But besides that, I mean, that was in what, 80s, late 80s, mid 80s, who knows, early 80s maybe even. So my goal was always to build some type of a community within within the music industry. And it's very ambitious, but I think it's working because we all love the same things, right? We love good food. We love good sounding music. We love talented people, being around talented, people. And I hope to have this block really to be have that sense of community. And so far, we're proving that when you build it right, they will come, and on any given night, you have from Terrace and at the bar, and you have Thundercat having dinner with Domi and JD back, and then we'll have the executive at Universal, or we have the executive that came up with the show The Bear, or we have Raymond from Everyone Loves Raymond, Ray Romano from it. So it's like, but it's the craziest. It's not pretentious at all. And to me that was very, very important, that I wanted to be authentic. So going back to your question, I feel like in today's world, we have to think like that. I feel like the engineer of the future, to be a successful mixer producer, we're going to have to think outside the box, right?
Yeah.
Part of it was proving it to the community, to my peers, and hopefully new generations, to say, look, you can do this. You don't have to be pigeonholed and just be the mixer. Yeah. You can do things that you absolutely love to do, but there's a big but. You gotta work hard. You can't, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to be, oh yeah, I'm going to go open up I love dogs. I'm going to go open up a pet shop or
right.
a pet, or you can do it, but you got to love it. You got to be committed. Right. And just know that it will be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. I can write a book about verse before the doors even open, so it's been the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life, but it's the most fulfilling as well, right? So in my mixing career, and I'm sure you can speak about it on your own, like, it's one of the hardest things that you've done in your life, right? But the fulfillment that you get from it it doesn't compare to anything. So I'm the living proof of, man, you just gotta really, really go for it. So the engineer of the future, hopefully, will be inspired, and hopefully there's an ounce of inspiration to be like, if you dream it, you go and do it, but a one-dimensional producer, mixer, I don't know if those are going to exist anymore, to be completely honest with you. I think that, and it doesn't mean that you got to go build a restaurant,
Right.
What it means is, it means that you got to be inspired by other things, and it could be nature, could be a restaurant, could be whatever it is. But just know that inspiration will help you in here. I feel like after opening Verse, the most surprising thing is that I needed that inspiration, because I've been mixing since I was freaking 18 years old, 19. So I feel like you can only get so much inspiration from books and nature and all. Great, but I think I needed something new to kick my ass to be like, okay. So now I come here and this is like my haven, my safe haven,
Right.
because someone's screaming at somebody next door that they didn't get their food in time, or the one thing. Okay, I know you didn't ask me this, but people ask me what's the best and worst thing about a restaurant, right? Most common question I get. And I go, man, look, there's some great people I've met that I feel like could be lifelong friends,
Right.
some beautiful human beings, right? And then what's the worst? The people, I meet some human beings too,
Yeah.
and it's a good realization of like what's around you. Like there's good people and then there's bad people, and it's a good reminder, and you see it on a daily basis in the restaurant. It blows my mind, and hopefully you look in the mirror and be like, man, just be nice to your server. They're going through their struggle too, and they're probably a struggling actor, that's
Right.
fearful of AI as well. Like it gives you a little more empathy, and I feel like, man, listen, I know it's going to sound weird, but I think we need a little bit of more of that. Just don't yell at your server, because your server's trying their best, and if they're not trying their best, they're gonna figure it out. Just don't be a mean, just be a nice person. That's it. It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
And you learn that there's some shitty people out there. So I hope that the future mixer, engineer, producer thinks outside the box.
Yeah.
And always go against the grain. Again, you always, to me, again, if everybody's mixing in the box, then I got to go against the grain, because it's a game of inches too. So don't follow the trends. You got to just be bold. Be brave and bold, and take chances too.
Yeah.
And taking the chance was the studio or the new, and I'm opening up yet another restaurant. Crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing, bro.
Concept. Yeah, I know.
Amazing, bro. That's so amazing.
So look, again, I hope it inspires our peers to be like, you know what, man, I was pigeonholed. Now it's time to break those chains and just go and hopefully do something that you've always wanted to do that kind of keeps you going. But a one-dimensional creative I think that's the thing of the past,
Yeah.
I think past. One last thing is like, I love Whitney. She, I mixed one of her songs when I was super young, and she, worked with her very, very closely with her for a long time.
Wow.
But someone like Whitney, an artist like Whitney today, would probably have a very hard time as an artist, right? Because back then, man, she's arguably the greatest singer of our generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But today, you can be the greatest singer of this generation, and it doesn't guarantee that you're gonna make it, right? So it goes back to today's artist has to have not only hopefully a good voice, but they also got to dance. They also got to be their own social media captain, right? They got to have the fashion, some type of fashion, whatever that is. So you got to be multifaceted today to be an artist, right? And I feel like that's the same thing going down to us, to producers, engineers, musicians, mixers. We can't be we can't be one dimensional anymore. And so I do think that that's the future of our trade,
Yeah. Well, I hear you on that. I think that goes with everybody. I will say that, also, man, just your resilience, a lot of people don't know, because it's like you open verse and then we had the pandemic, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, you came back stronger. It's stronger than ever. I've been, obviously I've been playing there and been around since you started it. And man, we haven't lost a beat. The food is still crazy. Shout out to Chef. It's like, listen, man, you're expanding. I mean, that speaks to you as a leader and your resilience, man. So, just congratulations for being such a great leader, bro. And I've seen that. I feel proud to know you because I've seen that. And you're just, listen, man, you're doing your thing, bro. So I always ask this as the last question for everybody. One thing, Manny, the whole career, one thing that stands out out of your whole career? It could be a realization, a milestone, anything. You know what I'm saying? A moment, whatever. Just one thing that really stands out.
One thing that comes back is like not to take yourself too seriously. Life is, the older you get, you realize that life is, hey, listen, life is short, and try to enjoy those moments that when we get our butts whooped, and when I realized that when a big client leaves you and goes to someone else, right? That it's almost like getting dumped by a boyfriend, girlfriend, right? It hurts. It hurts like hell.
Yeah.
And when I realized that look, as much as it hurts, it's part of the process, then you can be clear. You can have a clear mind towards the art form. And I do believe that to be successful, you have to have a clear mind and perspective every single time. As like an athlete, every game that you're going to, you gotta have that clear mind, or else you will not have a good game. When I come in the studio and I'm about to mix that song, I have to like flip the switch and be mindful of being clear, because anything outside that door, there's a lot of noise. So to me, when I realized that, and I remember exactly when I had that conversation with myself, like, you know what, it's, you try to be perfect, you try to be good, but there's going to be times where you're going to strike out. And that doesn't mean that you suck or you this or your career is over. It just means that, okay, well, there's a game tomorrow, and I just missed that free throw to win the game, and we lost the game. If you carry that to your next game, you're going to be screwed, because you're going to have it in the back of your head. So the Kobe Bryants of the world, man, they had short-term memory loss. So that's the moment when I realized that I have to have short memory, and forget the lows, and also forget the highs too. Not forget. Don't over celebrate, because you're going to twist an ankle or something, then you won't be able to, like, you'll have an injury. We've seen that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Just celebrate internally, but don't get too high, don't get too low either, and it took me years to really come to grips with that. But one day it clicked, man. I remember that day, and from that point on, it's been, man, it's just like the amount of like stress and the heaviness, that you carry with you was just lifted, and I hope that every creator has that aha moment, to be almost free. I know it sounds very I don't know what it sounds like, but it sounds like, for me personally, that moment was really important, and it just bought me another 20 years of a career,
Yeah, man, listen, that is such wonderful information. And, a lot of people watching, some, will not even be engineers, but these lessons can be applied to whatever you do. And seeing this playbook, you could apply it to whatever you're in, even if it's not music, but definitely if it is music. So, Manny, I really appreciate you coming to the TrevBeats Show, man. I mean,
I got listen. One more thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because you've been you're good for my ego right now. I feel really great. But you've given me some great compliments, and thank you. But I must say this, that it takes a village, So I'm kind of like the captain, but without my team and without any of them, this would not be possible. So I like to say that, thankfully, I have a great team, and hopefully you surround yourself with people that see the same vision as you, and just hold on to them. So to me, it's shout out to the team, whether it's Verse, Larrabee, the Sweets, wherever, or the new restaurant. I got to thank them. I don't want to take all the credit, because it wouldn't be fair, because I have a great team. So, surround yourself with good people,
Yeah, and the experience is amazing at all those places. And, I can speak to every interaction I've had. I mean, your staff is great. You know what I'm saying? The service is great. The food's great. The studio vibe is great. The stuff is always working. It's just together. And of course, it reflects on you, but I agree, you do have a great staff and a great team, man. So that's also one of the other keys, one of the other lessons to be learned is that, and the lesson that I'm forever, always still learning is get great people around you. And you don't have to always do everything yourself. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong in delegating. There's no weakness in delegating, right? So,
That's another favorite.
yeah, that's like it's just something that as life keeps going on, we keep learning, man. But listen, I look forward to coming and eating some of that food soon over there, man, and playing some more over there next year.
It's always good to see you up there, man. It's always good.
I got to come play. Yeah, man. So, Manny, thanks again, bro. And it's like, this is very inspiring, man. And, you've always been one of the guys. I just, before we go out, I don't remember what I was working on, but I remember we just ran into each other in New York one day. Remember that? And then I came up to the studio, and I don't even remember why I was there. And then you were like, maybe you were working with Warren or something. It was It was like a Hamilton moment. Like we were like all the way in New York, and it was like, hey, what's up, bro? Like, it's just now those are probably apartment buildings or whatever. You know what I'm saying? The studio,
they're condos for sure.
Yeah, man. It's crazy, man, how this thing has gone, and where things are. But man, it's a blessing to have you as a friend, man. And say hello to your beautiful family, man. And thank you for coming to the TrevBeats Show, man.
And
really appreciate it.
You're so natural at this, and keep doing these, man. I love these. This is like the most fun I've had in a long time doing one of these. So
thank you, man.
Great job doing it.
Thank you, man. I'm working on it, man, and I discovered it as a passion. And really, I want the information out from, I'm a firm believer in the farm to table concept, right? You know what I mean? So, thankfully, through our job, the Rolodex has certain people in it, and the relationships are allowing people like yourself to come on and give this invaluable information from the source, not reading about it. This is from someone who did it tangibly. And that's where, to me, it starts getting a little bit weird in these last 20, 30 years, because we have now people teaching that never did it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to get back to the old days, you know what I'm saying, when it was like the cats were like, hey, this is how you do it. You know what I mean? So, I appreciate you for coming on and sharing this information, man. And, we'll have to do it again soon, man. And I will definitely be there to see you.
Volume 2, let's go. Let's keep going.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Have a great one.
Thank you,
so many gems there. There's so many gems and things you can apply. And it doesn't matter if you're going to be a mix engineer or not. You could just apply them to life and definitely apply them to your musical career. If you love that, you like that content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget everything in the description. We have our links to all the gear I use and everything else at the website, TrevorLawrenceJr.com, all of our merch and the various products that we have. So please check out the description for that. Thank you for your support with the TrevBeats Show, and we will have these conversations and dialogue. We out.
It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out. We out. It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out.